There are a couple of guys who wrote a paper and they were talking about safetyism. It's a cultural belief system which safety, including emotional safety, has become sacred value, which means that people become unwilling to make trade-offs that involve safety, even when the trade-off might be reasonable and necessary.
Today, we have 17-year dating expert Damien Diecke.
He's exposing the reality of male fragility and how to build true resilience needed for modern dating success.
Stay tuned to learn how to overcome conflict avoidance and master the art of attraction.
Safety has become occultishly the only factor that you consider. It's a little bit like hand washing for germs. You don't develop an immune system. So if it's an emotional immune system, we're not developing an emotional immune system. To be 100% emotionally safe is to be 100% emotionally isolated and alone and disconnected.
We've made the safest generation in human history in America, and we've made them fragile. The way that ghosting is talked about, on how it's just socially rude, that it's this horrible thing that someone's doing to somebody else. But when I was looking through this, it occurred to me that it's just conflict avoidance.
This conflict avoidance is got to be hurting guys, not just in dating. It's got to be hurting them in their careers. Because if you're not willing to hear no regularly, you're never going to hear yes.
I've got guys as late as 40 coming in, and it's like talking to a middle schooler about how to approach women.
The fear of approaching women, the fear of rejection, the fear of looking like an idiot in front of other people, all their friends, being laughed at. It used to be men were afraid of rejection. They get rejected. It kind of sucked, but they'd move on. What I experience more now than ever before was they get rejected once or twice and they just can't go on.
What are you doing to help guys start to build that resilience back up and take on that failure?
One of the big things I do is I get them.
That's a great idea. One other thing that you would recommend some of the guys listening to try if they're looking to build out that emotional resilience? Hey, Damien, thanks for coming back on, buddy.
Thanks for having me, Tim.
Yeah, man. So like we were talking about a little bit before, I really like the topic that you picked to come on and talk about, because I think it's one that either gets the wrong kind of attention, as in like a blaming aspect, or it gets completely ignored. So I think we're going to thread the needle pretty well today and help some guys out. You've said before when you've been on that it's not so much that dating is harder today than it used to be. It's that we are less capable of dating, and specifically that there's a resiliency issue and a conflict avoidance that happens for younger guys now. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I mean, as you can imagine, way back when I started, 17 years ago when I started coaching guys, you can imagine a lot of the guys, 90% who came to me would definitely have experienced what they would colloquially have termed approach anxiety. You know, the fear of approaching women, the fear of rejection, the fear of looking like an idiot in front of other people, all their friends, being laughed at. Of course that existed plenty. When I started, that was one of my primary roles, was helping people through that, getting over that hump. But it's been interesting what I see, and if I just talk about just what I witness as a coach first, I have a lot of difficulty now as a coach working through, and first of all, men's resiliency to rejection. So it used to be men were afraid of rejection. They get rejected. It kind of sucked, but they'd move on. What I experience more now than ever before was they get rejected once or twice and they just can't go on. Now, it used to happen somewhat. Now it happens a lot. So that's the first thing I see. I see this a big drop in resiliency. I also see a big increase in other generalized anxiety disorders that are accompanying the approach anxiety, or the, just there with the men along for the ride. Now, I always had, a smattering of guys who had, anxiety. I have a huge history of panic attacks and anxiety especially when I was younger. And so, yes, I'd always have men who had that. But the degree to which I would say 70% of my clients now have an active psychological difficulty that's based around stress or depression. And I never used to have such a high number. And it's not because my clients have changed. I tend to get clients who are, because of who I am and the way I advertise and the way I talk and the types of videos I make, I tend to get clients who are white collar, generally have their lives together. They're definitely above average in intelligence. They tend to focus more on their career than dating. So, this is the kind of guys they were. And they tend to be on the nice end of the spectrum. They're not the aggressive, overly sexual guys that are scaring women away. They're the guys who are sweet, naive, worried about women, don't have a lot of experience on average. That obviously, there's a spectrum there. But, that's who I'm getting. And so to see that relatively normal section of society. I say that because I think a lot of people may think as a dating coach that I'm getting guys who are a bit weird to begin with, or a bit socially awkward, you know, that kind of stuff. And of course I get some, but you'd be amazed at how many just regular dudes are coming to me. You know, that's always been the case, just regular guys looking for help. It has been overwhelming. And it's not just me. I've spoken to a bunch of other dating coaches, some on podcasts, some just one-to-one, and they're all saying the same thing. The resilience to rejection has just gone through the roof. And, you know, I mean, there are a lot of factors that contribute to it. I mean, I remember already like 5 years ago, 6 years ago, 7 years ago, guys were starting to be really worried about getting canceled. You know, I'm a doctor. I'm worried about approaching because what if someone records my interaction, puts it up online, and I lose my license because of it? And you're like, would that really happen? I've never heard of it. I mean, it's technically possible, but you'd also have to actually be quite rude for that to happen, but you can never rule it out. And these fears have started to compound, you know, because if you made a mistake back when I started 17 years ago, that was it. You made a mistake, people laughed at you, but tomorrow no one knew what happened. And that is a new fear that's been unlocked. That you can't put that genie back in the bottle.
I like how you're talking about the stacking of it, because it essentially feels like when I'm working with it clinically with guys, for all the reasons you're saying, right? All those anxieties, the fear of rejection, the fear of being canceled in some way. It's like these guys come in and, man, I've got guys as late as 40 coming in, and it's like talking to a middle schooler about how to approach women. Like the stuff that when we were in middle school, that was what we were working on, was how to be awkward around women. And now, like they've, you know, like you said, right, they've focused on other things. And now they're getting to the point in life where they want to get back to it. And it's overwhelming for them.
It is. And I think the difficulty that we have societally is that those men are generally scoffed at. So it's not okay to be like that. And I think they're scoffed at. There's a lot that happens when you're not socially calibrated, when you don't have the social experience to enable you to be socially calibrated. And it's interesting because I was having a conversation with my wife last night about this as well. Let's take the topic of consent. It's a complicated topic, right? Where people can be hurt without the intention to hurt people. And if you are a man who is 30 years old and you don't have much experience with women, you're not very good at reading social cues and body language, how do you know when a woman's not comfortable with you making a move? And so what happens is you create these situations where you say, well, who's at fault when this happens? Because these men can get into a lot of trouble if this woman, even if he hasn't done anything crazy, if she just tells all her friends, this guy was really creepy and he made me feel weird, that gets to the wrong people. That can already hurt him socially quite heavily. But who's to blame in that situation? You can't blame the guy for not having the experience because of the way society raised him. And you can't necessarily, it's not fair to necessarily just treat the woman to say, well, you shouldn't have put yourself in that situation. You know,
or that you just have to put up with it.
Or that you just have to put up with it. That's not a fair thing to say either. Yeah. And you get this situation where the men are, I guess, the difficulty is society calls the men sleazy or creepy or bad. They're demonized. Now, obviously, there are times when men do things that are just terrible. I'm not talking about those guys. I just want to make that clear. I'm not defending all forms of shit male behavior.
Yeah, there's a distinction between awkward and harassment.
Yeah. But the difficulty is there's gray space. You know, let alone what if a guy's on the spectrum? He's even less equipped to read social cues. You know, I was talking to my wife, an example. What happens if, let's say, a woman invites him over to her place? He doesn't know what it means, but he knows, oh, well, it could mean she's interested in me. Oh, she want to have sex with me? His friends are just being blokes, like, oh, man, she's totally in, man. Go for it. The actual context isn't there. She just sees him as a friend. There was plenty of other context there that someone else might, but he doesn't, right? And then what is it? He's making her uncomfortable in her own house. He's making the move because everyone's told him he should. It's hard. I don't know how we got down that rabbit hole, but these are the things that I'm seeing. And it's worse now because you can't really seek support for it. When I've seen, not always, but I've seen a lot of posts put up by people, men or women, it's not balanced. Everyone's so extremist right now in their take on especially male and female behavior and dating, and especially around sex, and especially around consent and these kind of areas, topics. I understand why it's sensitive. And I understand why women feel protective to make sure women aren't being blamed. I can see how that's happened. But it's put men in a predicament. Or I guess, no, it's not, but this isn't the only thing. It's just one of those factors. When you're talking about layers and things adding on, this is one of those layers. When I was learning this stuff, I never had to be worried about it. You know, if I accidentally made someone feel uncomfortable, they'd talk to me about it with their social group and make me feel like an idiot, and then it would move on. That's not how it is anymore.
Well, and it was usually viewed by somebody. Like it would happen at parties where people, like, even if it was just your other male buddies ball busting you for it going badly, there was a feedback loop that wasn't permanent. And like on the other end of things, I can't remember, it was a podcast conversation I was having in a previous episode or one I heard, but I love how it was framed where, let's say that a woman's debating what to take this guy as. Her first assessment has to be her safety. And she doesn't know if you're like the 1 in 20 guys that would hurt her. And so she's got to behave like you are. And that's the tragedy of it all, right? Like there's lots of women, people that listen to this, women that have talked to their partners, moms that have asked me about sons on like how to deal with this. How do I support men through this? And at the end of the day, it always comes back to safety with some of these things. And I think that's our kind of big failure that we're having by losing all the third spaces and all the places where it used to happen in view, right? It used to happen around folks and it was a temporary thing, as opposed to if it happens, it might be forever. And it might be exposed to people that aren't in your social group, people that you don't trust to correct you. And just the isolation that the women experience with that too, right on the other end of it. There's just not as much safety in their world because they're not in a social group of people they trust a lot of time.
I think the problem is the safety, the concept of safety, I think is something that I think is a contributing factor to the problem that we have. I was reading a paper actually this morning because I was just having a look at some stuff, you know, what was out there already on the research. And there are a couple of guys who wrote a paper and they were talking about what they called safetyism, which is where just to literally read it out. It's a cultural belief system which safety, including emotional safety, has become sacred value, which means that people become unwilling to make trade-offs that involve safety, even when the trade-off might be reasonable and necessary. And I think that there's something that's changed in a society where safety has become occultishly the only factor that you consider. Or if safety is online, it becomes, because there's so much that we do to increase safety. And I mean, on the face of it, it sounds great. Let's keep our children safe. Let's keep but it's a little bit like hand washing for germs and microbes. You don't develop an immune system, you know? And so if it's an emotional immune system, we're not developing an emotional immune system. And I think there is something in that, you know, I remember 8-9 years ago when Jordan Peterson popped onto the scene, you know, there was this whole thing about he was making people feel unsafe on campus. And it was funny because I was looking at that and thinking, but isn't that the whole point of university? You know, like, I don't have to agree with the dude, but Jesus, he's not preaching death to all like religious groups or death to all. No, he's just got opinion about psychology and about, you know, people. And it was really wild that we don't allow our teens to even be introduced to concepts that might threaten their emotional safety or their worldview or their paradigm. That was the whole point of university once upon a time.
The thought that's immediately coming into my mind with that is, like, the red pill movement is just as bad on the other end of it. Their emotional safety is so important that you are better off entirely disconnecting from the whole of another gender to make sure that you are emotionally safe, that the best thing that you can do is be a man in isolation, that is the key to strength, which it's crap. We as a species have never done that. There's never been a point in human history where the solo person is the ideal way to be. The Jordan Peterson thing is interesting. I was thinking about this the other day, where it's where a lot of my liberal colleagues lost my more conservative colleagues when they started saying words are violence. It's not. Don't get me wrong. It needs to be corrected. There are plenty of things that words can do. There's things that need to be done about them, but there's a difference between that and assault. But the emotional response has been very similar. Like, people are flinching like they're being punched in the face when it's a rejection or a embarrassing moment.
And it used to seem like it was just a left-wing liberal response, but It's not happening now. Now it's the right wing. Now the right wing is overly correcting, is overly being emotionally responsive, reactive to things that are being talked about and mentioned. You know, like it's everyone now, and it's wild. It isn't just limited to small groups. But yeah, you're right, and I think it's a very valid point. And I've seen a lot of women talk about, and you see it in the numbers too, right? Women are electively being single far more often than ever before as well.
Yeah, everybody's just locking it down because safety, emotional safety, is the priority as opposed to connected living.
As far as I'm concerned, to be 100% emotionally safety is also safe, is to be 100% emotionally isolated and alone and disconnected. And I mean, the amount of times just my wife and I mean, we're relatively similar in a lot of political areas, but the amount of times that we have emotionally unsafe conversations, so to speak, you know, and really challenge each other on things that were like, wait up, no, that's not okay. And I don't know, that's how we bond, actually, to some degree.
To a great degree. Like I don't feel close with someone until there's been a mistake and we've repaired. Because yeah, if I can't make a mistake with you and the relationship continue, there's only so much of myself I'm going to invest. And if you make a mistake and I call you out and you can't repair it with me, then I don't feel safe to connect and grow with you. And I think that's one of the harder parts about people coming in with different kinds of abuse situations when it comes to dating is they're like, well, how do I know I'll be safe? And having to say you won't be. You'll be as safe as is reasonable. And there's a lot of gray in what is reasonable.
Yeah, and I think that's risk aversion is a spectrum, right? And everyone's going to sit somewhere in that, but it's just that the bell curve is being shifted. That's, I guess, what I'm saying, you know. There's always going to be some people, like I'm financially a lot less risk averse than most people. Like I'll take some financial risk, but I cannot gamble for the life of me. I hate gambling because that's just a dumb risk. You know what I mean? I'll bet on myself even when I might lose. I'm okay
like,
with
the math
that.
Doesn't make sense here. What are you doing?
The math has to math first, you know. I'm not crazy with my risk aversion. And you know, some guys are incredibly bullish with financial risk, which is part of the reason that Wall Street is problematic with having too many men.
Well, what I keep thinking of is a lot of the guys that I work with that are those white collar guys, or that they're the young guys in college that really, like, they never dated in high school. They're getting to the end of college. They haven't gone on a date yet. And they come in and they're trying to figure it out. They're always surprised when I say that a significant portion of the first responders I work with have to work on this. The guys running into burning buildings, the guys running towards gunfire are often a lot of times the guys that are like, I don't know how to be emotionally vulnerable with a woman. And so I can't connect.
I think that's long been the thing, isn't it? Like men are trained to be physically brave, so to speak, but they're not trained to be emotionally brave at all.
Well, and that's even gotten less so. Like we've made the safest generation in human history in America, and we've made them fragile. I was thinking about this in regards to the habits we're seeing in dating now with all this fragility that we're describing. And it struck me the way that ghosting is talked about, on how it's just socially rude, right? That it's this horrible thing that someone's doing to somebody else. But when I was looking through this, it occurred to me that it's just conflict avoidant. Like some people are rude, some people are being shitty, but more than not, I imagine, it's just people that don't want to have a conflict to say, I don't want to see you again because of X.
I mean, I'd argue almost all of the frustrating dating issues that arise, the things that women do, the things that men do, it's conflict avoidance. When women say, why don't men say it if they just want sex? Conflict avoidance. You know, why do women give their number and then not call me back? Conflict avoidance. You know, ghosting. I mean, most of the frustrations come down to that. And it's gotten worse. That has gotten worse too.
What's interesting to me about it from a clinical end of things is if you're the one doing the ghosting, there's always this little piece of fear that lives in you that you will eventually have to have the conflict, right? So Denver, it's a reasonably big city, but it's not that big of a city. And so the amount of times that I've had a patient come in and having run into somebody they went on a date with, it happens enough to be a worry. Whereas if you just close things out, it's so much less awkward when you see them again, and that worry that you don't have to carry. But people collect them like they're collecting coins in a backpack. And every single one isn't that heavy, but if you date long enough and you do it long enough, you're running around with an extra 10 pounds on your back.
Well, I mean, it's interesting. When I coach the guys, because I often talk a lot about, the idea of locus of control. So, not explaining it to you, but like to kind of just explain it outwards to anyone listening, right? So there's a locus, like a series of points around you, things that you feel like you would dare to do, that would be safe for you to do, or that you're capable of doing without losing your marbles, so to speak. And the more you poke at that boundary in any one direction, the larger that circumference of that radius gets. So if you're right now afraid of both asking for a raise from your boss and telling the girl you've been dating for a year that you've lost feelings and want to split up, if you do one of those things, the other instantly becomes much easier, even though they're in totally different spheres of your life. And I think I'm forever telling the guys too that every time they do that, like they ghost or they, do this stuff, forget the moral call, because I always hate morals in dating. It confuses things and just tries to guilt trip people into the right behavior. Every time you do it, you make it harder for yourself to approach the next time you see a girl that you like, because you're actively avoiding conflict or potential conflict. You're actively avoiding like social situations that you find uncomfortable. And if you tackle them in any other area, they're going to be easier in every other area.
Well, and I even go so far as to coach the guys to cue the conflict up before it's even there. If you go out on a date or two, at the end of the date, asking fairly bluntly, like, hey, how'd this go for you? This is how it went for me. And guys are even scared of doing that, right? They're scared of just like opening that window to the conflict. And the only thing that sells them on it is you're more likely to get the second date. Like if you show you can talk this out with her, you are demonstrating emotional competence, and you always are more likely to get what you want when you ask for it.
Yeah, that's the thing, right? And that's such a big one. And that's why there's this conflict avoidance is got to be hurting guys, not just in dating. It's got to be hurting them in their careers. And because if you're not willing to hear no regularly, you're never going to hear yes. And that applies everywhere. It doesn't have to be big things, but it's it's all the little small things that we avoid it because we don't want to get a no. I mean, I can empathize. I have ADHD with rejection sensitivity. Like that's a thing that I've had, especially growing up as a kid, very strongly. So I get it. But if you can't start hearing no's, if you can't start getting that, you can't get anywhere.
Yeah, it's always like the two motivators in this is being brave enough to reach for what you want, and being brave enough to face for the fear to motivate you past it, right? The fear of not having it and the hope of having it moves the window of tolerance a little bit. And the easier one to deal with is being brave enough to reach. The one that takes a lot of pain to push somebody into making is the fear of the pain, right? It's the lash versus the cookie.
The wild thing, the interesting thing, maybe you can explain it to me, because I don't know what psychological principle it's leaning on. And I've thought about this. It doesn't matter if it's approaching a woman or asking her home or just saying what you want, right? If you want a relationship or, whatever it is. When you hesitate and do it really half-cocked, like I've been thinking, and I don't know. I mean, it depends on what you want to, and maybe if you're in the mood, that kind of deliberation. When you face the rejection like that, or if you go really direct, like what, I'm really enjoying these dates, and I want something more. I'd like this to be a relationship. Where are you at? If you do the second version and get rejected, the pain is a lot less than when you do it the deliberation version. It doesn't matter what you're doing. It doesn't matter if you're doing an approach, or it doesn't matter if you're, I don't know why it is, but everyone that I've coached agrees that it's a real thing. But I don't know what the principle is or why, but it's like, I remember the first time that when I was learning this stuff, and there's a girl working at I said girl because I was like 18, 19. There's a girl working at a takeaway store near me. And I thought she was cute, and I went back a couple of times, like, I got to do something about this. So I was really like direct, you know what? Every time I come here and I think you're really cute, I'd love to take you on a date. It's like, no, sorry, I'm not interested. I'm like, okay, and I left. I felt good. I felt good about that because I was really straightforward. I was really direct. I felt so good about it.
Well, you were proud of your behavior. So that mitigated the sting of the rejection.
Yeah. And I do believe that's a big part of it. I think when you get rejected and you're also ashamed of the way you even went about it, that could be the real bit that's getting guys. And obviously not just in dating, it's everywhere.
Yeah, it's essentially the overall goal is to be effective. The next goal is to mitigate the chances of pain, right? Not remove them, but mitigate them. And going into a conversation like that, kind of mealy-mouthed and talking around it, nobody likes doing that. I have yet to meet the person who is like, you know what feels really good? When I just like always ask it like a 3 volume.
Well, it's emasculating, right? I mean, maybe that's even the wrong word because women feel just as bad about it when they do the same thing, right? But as a man, that's how I would explain it. It just feels like I lost all my manhood just by all my confidence, all my sense of self. And, you see yourself as a certain character. And the second you behave like that, you're like, ugh.
You're confirming the character you're worried you are, right? And you're confirming the belief that you don't get what you ask for. And I think there's kind of two inflection points on it. Like one is adults have conversations and seek things out. A child talks his way around things and doesn't have the power to get what they want. They're dependent on the adults around them. So one, it brings you back to a point where you're disempowered just as a human being, but then men have the additional stack of the status hit, right? We react to a loss of status like women react to physical violence emotionally. And so it's complicated for anybody and it hurts for anybody. But if a guy feels like that rejection as a drop of status, like, oh, I'm not good enough to get this person, I'm not seen as enough to get this person, I'm not seen as someone who can get a person, all of that complicates it and makes it heavier.
Yeah, it's interesting to hear you say that when you talk about like an adult seeks for what they, want. One of the papers that I was reading around this was talking about the fact that as a child we learn we have to ask for permission for everything, and we learn that we have to go to mom and dad and seek approval. And the transition to adulthood is losing that and saying this is what I want, as opposed to looking for permission for everything. And he was saying that it's interesting when you look at the increase in office place conflict resolution. People now turn to email consistently. So verbal conflict resolution. And I'm not quite sure why or how he arrived at it, but he was explaining that going by email is a way of going back to that space of asking for permission. So, you don't go directly, you go in the indirect route, asking if it's okay to have this conversation, blah, 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 blah. And they go to AI to seek the permission, right? So AI, like everyone's going to AI to say, is it okay to be upset about this?
Or rewrite this email to be more effective, right? Where you can't do that in live time talking to somebody. Yeah. Yeah, and I think the AI tools are only going to make that worse. Like we were talking before the interview a little bit about AI's impact on dating and it rewriting profiles and the like, and it's making it so there's even less of a reason to just be clumsy until you get good. And then it's going to make it even more jarring when you go from online with these really polished responses that you've been coached by an AI for, to then sitting across from somebody. And it's going to be like dreadfully stark.
Yeah, that's true. And the terrible thing is, I think when it comes to writing, now that I think about it, I have in an old Hotmail account since I was like 15. I have conversations with my first girlfriend ever. We were both like very academically minded, and effort went into writing those messages, those emails, right? It was very well written things like sophisticated humor and all this stuff goes. But if I look at that, I think, yeah, what's happening is I'm taking my time to think through what would be funny, what would be witty, to talk about myself in an emotionally engaging way. There's an effort that's going in. It's slowing down the thing that I might do in real conversation and giving me a chance to think it through and actually express it in a way that is interesting and engaging. And I look at that and I think, well, yeah, really, in some ways, I'm training, not on purpose, but I'm getting an education in how to communicate, how to talk, how to get things out in a way that's effective. And when you use AI for everything, which I got to admit, I do for a lot of things now, and certainly kids are doing, right? Then you never get that education.
And you lose it is the crazy thing to me. So they've done all these studies about writing now, and people who use AI get worse. It's not even like I stopped improving here. It's that your ability to go through the cognitions and the process of writing drops significantly. And I'm really glad I read that before I got too far in, because I was noticing it was getting harder, and I was going to the AI more and more. And then finally, like, I read that and I was like, okay, I'm going to just suck for a while again. Like, get back to writing my own emails, get back to not polishing everything. And that's just for emails, much less the emotionally fraught dating things, right? Like, it's hard to convince guys that the tools that make this easier are the tools that keep you from having what you want.
That's a very good way to put it. But yeah, it's true, isn't it? It's you can shortcut yourself into irrelevance.
I think that's one of the things that I was kind of curious about your take on with this, right? So we've got a generation or two of guys where this has all happened, where they're far more emotionally fragile, they're far more acute to rejection. Some of it was the idea of cancel culture and how impactful that's been for guys. That fear of status loss is very real for us. And it tends to be blown out of proportion of what is likely to be, but there's enough examples of it occurring to always feed that fear. What are some other places and ways that we've lost getting guys in front of this? Like, what are you hearing from the younger guys you're working with and noticing the opportunities that they didn't have that we did?
I mean, a big one is playing with kids outside without parental supervision. I mean, that was so common, right? Like, there was a lot of conflict resolution in a pack of 6 or 7 or 8 kids on BMXs meeting up every day in the holidays.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot
just
of
that
conflict,
social friction very young.
Yeah. Then there's conflict at school. Like, even the way bullying is handled now is completely different. Like, it doesn't get managed the way it used to. And I'm kind of one of those parents who's like, if they hit you, you hit them back. Even though it's politically incorrect, I'm going to be one of those parents. My wife she's half black, and there was a kid being racist at school, and the school wasn't doing anything. And her dad said, next time you do it, you hit him. And if you don't hit him, I'm grounding you. She broke his nose. The school called the father in. The father was like, no, I back what my daughter did. You didn't do anything. And she was being racist to her multiple days. It's stupid, but to do that here in Australia now at this point in time is dangerous. Or the States, of course, as well. I mean, you can actually risk legal challenges to your child at that point.
Yeah, it's one of the things that gets really tricky. So I work a lot with police. I love my resource officers in schools. They're good officers who, in another role, would love to be the football coach, right? Those are the guys and gals that volunteer from the police force to go be a resource officer in a middle school. The problem is just them being there. The minute that a young boy has contact that's documented with a police officer, his chances to go to jail now outnumber his chances to go to college. And so, like, it's again, we're trying to create that safety, and there's a lot of very complicated reasons why American schools want an armed person at the school, right? And there's a lot of debate around that. But one of the big things is it makes it so that the stakes for punching the kid that punches you, or for punching the kid or escalating with a kid that's harassing you, the stakes are a lot higher. And it's not just about what the parent does to you when you get home anymore. These are big systemic shifts.
Definitely. But to go back to what you say, I think that's a big one. That we don't have to do those things. I mean, mobile phones. Do you remember? Hey, Mrs. Layton, is your daughter there? My name is Damien. That was a form of scary conflict. I'm sorry, but that was a weird social thing. And there are all these tiny little rites of passage that you don't have. They're just abnormal now. Like, you're sexting with a girl whose parents don't even know you exist at the age of 15. It's stupid, but it's wild.
If you're young, the idea of calling a girl out of the blue versus a texting, like a soft approach.
Yeah. And girls don't want to be called at that age either. Like, oh, no, don't call me.
They all have anxiety for just answering the phone.
I mean, that list goes on and on and on when I sort of start to think about it. It's academic feedback has changed. The way academic feedback is given, like it used to be, you could get really brutal academic feedback on, especially in university when you're at like master's, PhD level. No, it's changing now, right? Like the grading system. I remember like a long time ago, the states changed it to like participation awards, and they realized that didn't work, and they've scaled that back, I believe, or they're trying to. But all this stuff, we're not allowed to. And a lot of schools want to have sports where there's no points, so there's no losers. Are you kidding me? I understand why, because you're trying to save people's emotions, but yeah,
it's a rough sell here in America. We love
thing.
having winners and losers.
Yeah, but it's that sanitation thing again. Washing hands all the time as opposed to. And I don't know how you decide where the correct safe point is, because obviously safety is a real thing. Like it needs to be, especially like for women, sexual safety is a very real problem. That there are so many women with lifelong psychological issues because they've been abused. I mean, it's this numbers are staggering. So it's a serious issue. So I don't know how you deal with it without collapsing society by making safety everything. I feel like an old man, kids these days,
Yeah.
They don't make them like they used to.
That's how we started the email conversation about this one to cue up the episode. It was like, are we old now?
Yeah.
Well, so what's interesting is as we have this conversation, and I think you articulated incredibly well when you said it's so many little moments that are just missed that have stacked up into this huge problem. And it's kind of bringing me around to some of the things I'm noticing I'm doing with patients to try to mitigate some of these. What are ways that you're having guys take this on? These guys that never had to ask the girl out, never had to call and go through the father answering the phone to ask to talk to the daughter. Was always an awesome thing about landlines. What are you doing to help guys start to build that resilience back up and take on that failure?
I kind of mentioned it before. One of the big things I do is I get them to start hunting for no's, not just with women either. Because usually rejection, just a sensitivity to rejection is a sensitivity to rejection in any like dimension. And so I usually get them to create a list of no's. No's, questions they need to ask or things they need to do where they're likely or possibly going to get a no. And I get them to start hunting for no's, right? So the things they need to ask for, like even it could be the housemate isn't cleaning things and putting them away properly, right? Starting to hunt for those opportunities and seeing the connection between when you can do these things, those things will be easier. So it's not destroying your life that now and again your housemate is leaving things dirty. You don't like it, but it's not destroying your life, and you don't need to have a fight about it. And so you leave it alone. But by doing those things, you bolster your ability to face those situations. So I tend to start pushing for that. I tend to start pushing for a lot more calling people instead of texting anytime there's something you need to talk to them about that's important. Because a lot of people avoid that now. It becomes an email or a text. So these are the things I tend to push because it's, again, that locus of control idea. That's how I'm sort of going about it a lot with my clients. How about yourself?
Well, fairly similar. I should make them do the list for homework. What I end up doing in sessions with them is I have them tell me a few things that they're scared to ask for. And then by the end of the conversation, we've picked the one that's within their window of tolerance. Like when you ask for this, that you're probably going to get no, which one of these is the one that's going to be easiest to take?
Yeah.
It's still going to hurt. You're still going to feel that rejection. You're still going to touch it, but which one's going to have the smallest impact? Okay. Now knowing that, can you go and do that this week? Can you go try that one? But I like the idea of having just a list to come back to every week. I think that's genius. I don't know why I didn't think of it. Another way that I've kind of, I think this is really generational, right? Like a 20-year-old asking a 20-year-old, this probably sounds like a slice of hell, but a 40-year-old asking a 40-year-old is a lot more viable, is doing voice notes through the apps instead of texting. Like you get a better sense of the other person, you get to hear their voice, and it showcases that you're not using AI.
Yeah. It's actually very effective in dating too, by the way. Like if you voice note a lot more of the things, like it tends to be quite effective.
Well, and it helps too, because then for the guys that are really, really soft on the social cues, if they do it and the woman starts doing it back and they're really having a hard time interpreting it, they can bring it in and play it and we can talk about it and I can guide them through making their guesses. And so it's kind of like a training wheel conversation that happens in bits and pieces.
That's true. I hadn't thought of that. But it's actually, I mean, now that you talk about the voice notes, I've been getting guys to do with some things, but actually I realize voice notes, they're actually an incredibly good way a better way to do things. Like even if they're trying to be flirtatious in a slightly sexual way, to do that by voice note is a lot more confronting, but it's actually far less likely you're going to miss the mark or be misinterpreted.
That's always my problem is and maybe it's because I'm a counselor, right? I'm an empathetic guy. There's a reason why I have this job and do this job. I hate trying to figure out emotional subtext in texting. And so the minute that just in my personal life, when I have a lack of clarity going back and forth with texting, or I'm assuming a negative response, I either get very direct in asking for what's happening, but that can come off as aggressive, or I just like do a voice note or call. Hey, this is more complicated than I can do on text. What's happening? And then you have your own inflections that you learn how to soften, you learn how to use the timbre of your voice, right? Just like anything else. It's a tool and it's an instrument that needs to learn how to be played, and you can't learn it if you don't try.
There are a lot of things that I know I can get away with vocally, but I can't get away with in text, just socially in general. Everyone has that, of course, to some degree.
Well, I was watching like the Charisma on Command channel was pretty popular for a while, and I like some of that guy's videos. And he was talking about the insult compliment, right? Where you're looking at someone and there's this quality that they just so obviously have that you make this outlandish comment about them not having it. When you try to do that by text, it doesn't come off like at all. It just makes you look really, really obtuse and kind of like an ass. Whereas if you say it with somebody with like a twinkle in your eye, an inflection in your voice, or a smirk, people get it.
Well, it's the thing, right? It's like I often have trouble. It's a hard nuance to explain to guys. You can go up to a girl and go like, "Hey, how's your night going?" But often they're like, "Hey, how's your night going?" Like I just got like this smile on my face, like I'm about to say something cheeky, and it's enough to disarm them, right? Like, okay, this is going to be a fun conversation, or this guy's in a good mood, or whatever else. But it's such an important nuance that the exact same words, my body's not doing much different. Just my face is just communicating something. Let me ask you a question. The wrong way around, because we're on your podcast, but I'm curious your thoughts, because we were talking about the AI, right, and then we're talking about the verbal, which is why I'm going here. Something that I've started doing a lot the last 4 weeks. I've started, whenever there's something complicated in my life, and I need to write an email, so it might not be conflict avoidant, but it's complex, and I've started throwing a verbal dump at AI. This is what I'm feeling. This is what I'm experiencing. This is what I want to say. This is how I want to come across, but I don't want to cause offense. This is what I got to think about. I want to really, and I verbalize all my feelings and what I'm thinking, experiencing. And that then helps me to structure it properly. Does that make sense? Then it gives me better structure to what I'm thinking. And I look at that and I change some things so it properly represents how I'm feeling. And then I use that. And it's been an interesting experience for me because it allows me to say all the things I want to say and all the things I think and all the things I feel without a filter. And then it shows me a way to get that out without being offensive or without being... And I wonder if that's unhealthy because I'm avoiding having to do that thinking myself, or if it's healthy because I'm getting a chance to get it all out. And at the same time, I'm learning, okay, this is how I could better word that. Because I've noticed since I've been doing it, I am getting better at structuring my feedback or my thoughts on some things. So it's interesting on that vocal thing.
Well, it's going to be yes and. Getting structure from an AI where you just kind of verbally dump into it and then say, bullet point this and summarize what I've said. That's letting you get direct feedback on what's being heard when you speak, but it's getting feedback from an AI. And so a lot of it's going to depend on the quality of the AI and what the AI is designed for. But it can also become, rather than a tool to build, it can become a crutch of dependence, where all of a sudden you've got a quick turnaround on something, or you've got an in-person conflict, and if you overuse it, you've now forgot how to do that in live time with somebody. And all of a sudden you've got to tap out. You're like, hey, I need space for this because I don't have the tool I need to communicate well with you. And so it's like anything like this, right? Like the idea that we're not going to use AIs for these things at this point is asinine. Like there's no way to move in the world communicating without AI touching it in some way, shape, or form. but the overuse of it and not bringing what you're learning there into your skill set in the real world is where the miss happens. And it's a very easy one to fall into.
Yeah, I can imagine that, especially when, I mean, it's the decay process is much slower for someone my age has lived most of his life without the use of AI, which is an important factor, right? Because if
it's not slower.
You don't think so? I would have assumed. No.
No, like so everything, there's this adage, and I don't remember where I got it from, but essentially everything a generation is afraid of the younger generation's doing, end up doing that really hard. Like the generation of Fox News folks were terrified that the internet and TV was going to radicalize their kids. And now those outlets have moved the polarization in really powerful ways. The millennial parents are terrified about their kids living on a screen. And then I go to a concert for Nine Inch Nails and 1 in 4 guys is watching it like this through their phone, right? The things we're afraid of happening to people we care about, the reason we're so afraid of them is because they easily could happen to us. And I don't have any like data to back that up. It's just been kind of my experience and what I've seen in the room with folks.
I mean, that's a whole other topic. The whole, I'm very torn when it comes to whether AI is helping or damaging us, or the skills we lose, are they needed or not needed? It's a whole different topic, but it's a thing that I've talked about a lot just with socially.
Well, I think for a tactical solution set on how to develop out some emotional like resilience is, if you're not in therapy and you don't have anybody you're comfortable talking to about this, working with an AI to come up with things to ask might not be the worst thing for you. But then relying on the AI on how to do it, maybe don't go that way. Maybe like use it for a list, don't use it for a solution, right? Use it to process, don't use it to do.
We get into that and we get again into conflict resolution. Almost every time I explain a problem to a real person, there's pushback. Wait, so why did you say that? Well, why was that a thing you did? What? AI doesn't do that. And while it's frustrating in its own way, because AI just accepts everything, even that is a form of like practicing communication and conflict. And yeah, I mean, you were talking about the other ways in which people just lack that thing. And that's another one, right? I mean, it's when you talk to all your mates about something in person, you're still talking to all your mates about something in person, and you're talking to the real humans, and that isolation that we have. It's wild.
Well, and I think that window of tolerance of emotional armor and kind of getting back to where you build that resilience, like the amount of guys that I work with that come in and want to date but can't name a best friend, like you are starting at the wrong entry point in this process.
Forever saying that to the guys, if you don't have a good, healthy social life outside of women, you shouldn't be chasing women yet. It's more important for your happiness and overall being to have that than to have like the women.
Well, and it lets you practice reading women for much lower stakes, like joining a volleyball league and joking around and seeing women respond to your jokes when it's just about volleyball is a lot less of a hit than reacting to your humor and trying to sleep with them. Like if you're listening to this and you want these solutions, really take some time and figure out where your opportunities are to fail, and go and fail, and take a minute after that. Don't avoid it. Don't dissociate from it. Don't run from it, but sit with how that failure feels. And it's not fun. It's going to suck, but that slowly proves to you that it's a suck you can take on. It's a suffering that you can go through and be okay on the other side of.
To add to that one thing, I'm curious if you agree with it, but is lacking that's needed in all this. There's no downtime. So it used to be when something bad happened, you ruminated on it for a while, like you processed it. Rumination's often negatively correlated, like associated now, but it doesn't have to be. We're supposed to some degree. That's processing. To run something through our heads over and over, it's uncomfortable and we don't like it. And now it tends to, and I notice, if I've got to be honest, I'm in this trap too sometimes, is I don't allow the downtime. Something bad happens, I'm like, oh, let me focus on my AI work, or let me focus on, and I don't have boredom time to process. And I think that's much bigger than anyone's giving it, well, most people are giving it proper attention for either.
Consistently. Like it's, Mark Manson was talking about the like needing silence or a lack of content stimulation to have his ideas, and he figured it out because he came up with all his best ideas in the shower, and he realized that's the one place he wasn't listening to podcasts, he wasn't listening to audiobooks, he wasn't watching something on TV. Maybe he's listening to music, but like that's where the thought happens.
I mean, it's good enough for Archimedes. It's good enough for Mark Mass. It's good enough for me, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, it goes back to that.
Too,
like, I can't remember. There's dozens of people where the shower idea is a thing, right? The biggest thing that we forget is that our phones, that we're like, people watching this right now on their phone, part of you is dissociated while you're listening to this.
I bet a lot of people are listening and reading something else at the same time.
Yeah.
Or doing something else.
I need a layered distraction to not feel what I'm uncomfortable with. And so one of the other things that I've done with guys that I had to do, because to be honest, through video games and media, I fell into this space for a while right after the divorce where I couldn't take the quiet. Like there was just so much going on and so much pain to process that I couldn't take it. And so it took I started with 3 minutes of silence. I had to set a timer and tolerate 3 minutes of just me in my head. And it sucked. And I remember the first week of doing it, I'd swear 3 minutes had gone by and it had been a minute. And then slowly worked it way up to that 15 minutes of mindfulness time where it's just me in my head every day. And then doing things like when I go walk the dog, rather than listening to a podcast, I either listen to music or I don't listen to anything, just to kind of be in the world a little bit. But it's hard. It takes real effort now to separate ourselves from the distraction that's always there in your hand.
And it's crazy how hard that is. I switched. Now when I drive, I listen to music. I'm going to go to gym, I listen to music. Instead of podcasts or YouTube videos or listen to an audiobook. That is painful sometimes. It's stupid. I used to really enjoy listening to music in the car. And to listen to music is painful. Fuck, I don't want to, I don't know what it is, right? You know what it is, the weird psychic pain we feel at the thought of having to be with our own thoughts. But then sometimes you must have this too. Sometimes you get in this groove and you just get in this train of thought and it's enjoyable. I don't know what it is. You're just enjoying thinking through something. It's a strange thing, but yeah, it's oddly hard.
Yeah, well, it's that dissociative impact of having another conversation to live. Basically, you're turning off your process and turning on your intake, and you're picking something to intake that doesn't hurt you. And within the self-help space, it's pretty bad because for those listening to this right now, this feels like you're doing something about your problem. But if you don't do anything that Damien and I talked about today, you wasted your time. If all you're doing is listening to content and looking for that perfect solution that isn't going to hurt, you're never going to find it. And there's dozens of people like us out there giving ideas.
I mean, that's often the problem too, is anytime you want to improve or get better at something, you got analysis paralysis because the amount of data you have access to is just for free. You don't have to be paying for it. I mean, there's just...
Oh, you're paying for it. You're just not paying money for it.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
You're paying time. And time for most of us is a lot more valuable than money. You can always go get more money for most people. Time, there's no making more time.
Well, that's how I've often looked at, I'm investing time for my education. And if I'm not getting an education from the time.
Or even just rest. I think that's the other thing is, people think binge watching something or listening to a few episodes or watching a few episodes or whatever is relaxing. It's triggering a dissociative impact so you can shut down for a little bit.
Yeah, it's an escape more than a relax in some ways, isn't it?
Yeah, but if you stay there too long, it's a good bridge, watching an episode of something to chill out and then going for a walk. That's a great idea. That's a way to make a bridge to it. But just hitting the next button 4 times before you go to bed, you're robbing yourself of time. Well, is there one other thing that you would recommend some of the guys listening to try if they're looking to build out that emotional resilience? To be able to take some of these rejections?
I think I want to state more strongly how critical having people, like friends, some form of people that you interact with regularly is when it comes to the dealing with rejection and conflict and pain. Because people normalize us. What I mean by that is people who don't hang around other people very often become neurotic in a whole variety of ways. Because other people, they sandpaper the rough edges, right? They tend to normalize us and anchor us. And I think that one of the big things is most men, it's a big shift I've noticed, it's slightly off topic, but it's another thing I notice, just don't have enough friends. They don't have enough social interaction at all. And they'll say, oh, it's because I'm introverted. Introverts still need social interaction. They still need other people. They don't need it as frequently or as large a dose, but they need it. And I think that men do not realize having guys not just to go out and meet girls with, but just having the dudes who you talk about your week, like you just shoot the shit, even if you're not talking about your trouble. I don't know what it is, but it regulates us emotionally. And I think if there's one thing I want to add, I think that's it, because I see it so much. It's gotten much worse. I've gotten much worse at it too. I think it's just our society and culture and the ways that we live make it easier to live without other people around. The normative ways of going through life aren't as social anymore, but I'm a firm believer that, we need that as humans. We're not built to be alone.
Yeah, without any friction, you just get prickly. And I like how you said that people stand off the edges for you.
Yeah.
And so I guess the kind of takeaway with that is wherever you're at in your resiliency, look for the place that's got your window of tolerance. If you've got friends, great. Go do it in the dating world. If you have 2 friends, go make a 3rd. If you don't have any female friends, but you have a lot of guy friends, go with the intention of making a female friend before you go try to have a girlfriend. Build up the rejection and the skills to read what's happening in front of you, because otherwise all those edges just bleed.
Yeah, and everything hurts.
I think that brings us to the end. And as per always, right, we're going to give you another swing at the questions. So what's a lesson that you learned about masculinity that was you were taught before you were 12 that's remained true through your life?
Funny, because I just want to repeat almost what I told you last time. That for some reason that still sticks out to me. Let me think for a second. A lesson that I was taught before I was like when I was young. I don't know if this is a lesson about masculinity or if this is going to sound toxic, but I'm going to say it anyway because it's always, but it ties neatly into the topic today. One thing my dad always taught me was that if you allow people to bully you or push you around without pushing back, that's the invitation for them to keep doing it. And it's no fun to bully someone who pushes back, so they'll stop eventually. And I don't mean just school bullies. I just mean anytime that people push you around or behave in ways that you should be putting barriers, they can sense when you won't put up with it. When you will put up with it, and they can sense when they won't. It's interesting. Yeah, I guess I've learned through life that if it's clear, I don't have to say anything, but I know internally it's clear I won't put up with you behaving like this. People know it before they do it and have to be told.
Yeah, there's ape stuff in there where just the way you're holding your posture and all the nonverbals are communicating that if you accept you have a boundary, people tend to respect it. And the only way to have it is to be confident that you'll enforce it. I do think that's masculine, right? I think when you talk about fathers, a lot of what they're doing is the masculinity of parenting is keeping the boundaries and the safety, right? Being the person that pushes back the things that are pushing in. I think that's spot on, and a few other guys have talked about that too. What's a time where pursuit of masculinity has hurt you?
I don't remember what I said last time, so I may repeat, and if I repeat, I'm sorry. I think I certainly know that I got overly obsessed with power dynamics in relationships. The idea that the man's always supposed to be in control or in charge, or that women like a man who's in control or charge, which, as an average is true. But I became obsessed with that whole power dynamic thing in relationships. And as I've become older, I'm so much more relaxed with it. Like yes, I can take charge when I need to, and I'm happy to step up. But it's not like I'm not constantly on edge. Like, am I taking enough control? Am I taking enough charge? And I think that really created bad dynamics in relationships when I was younger.
Well, it's that black and white dynamic with masculine rule sets. Like whether it's be dominant, a man is, a masculine quality is, if you always have to do that, you're missing the art of when to and when to recognize whether it's your lane to do it in. And so that dominance thing with women it comes up a lot. A lot of guys really, really struggle because they're like, oh, I'm supposed to be making all the decisions. No, man, you're not. You're supposed to be making decisions in the lane that you're trusted with. And it's not everything. That's too much. No one can do that. Yeah, I think it touches on how you framed it before, but I think it's still valid. And last but not least, right, we want to go out on that high. What's a time that pursuit of your masculinity empowered you?
Remember what I said last time to this question either. Everything that I've done in my life after the age of 23 is a result of my pursuit of understanding my own masculinity. So starting the company, School of Attraction, working as a dating coach, doing the corporate work, the relationships that I've been in, the styles of self-development I've attempted to do, all sprung from the first book I picked up on the topic, which is The Way of the Superior Man. And that book is not perfect. It's flawed in some ways. It's great in others. But it started a journey of trying to understand myself as a man and my masculinity and what that really meant to me. And that just became a whole coaching ideal, and it just filtered into everything. And so, yeah, I guess that for me, that literally was the direction of my life, or at least the way it's gone for the last 17 years. And I wouldn't call that a bad direction at all. I think I've had a very positive impact on a lot of lives as a result. So it was that moment of picking up that book.
Well, and the timing, right? I think every man looks for their test of manhood to feel like a man. And the problem with the modern world is there's no one answer. And so if you go into your gender like you did, where you're like, where does this touch my life and what do I want it to touch? Eventually you figure it out. And all of a sudden, the more you figure out, the more confident in your masculinity you are. And for me, like, the more adult I became, like my masculinity doing something fairly similar when I started exploring it was like started performative, right? Like, I think this is what a man does versus knowing what I as a man do.
And what's so interesting, I think, that I want to say on that is that if you were to ask me, Damien, do you feel super masculine? That would be a weird question to ask me now. You know what I mean? It's like, it's not that I feel super masculine. I just feel like me being me. And I feel okay with that. It's a weird thing. It's like, it's not that I feel so much more masculine than I did when I was young. No, that's ridiculous. That just feels weird. I don't know why. It just feels all wrong to say it like that, because that's not how I feel, and that's not reflective at all. But I just feel comfortable in my own skin being me. That's the only way I can put it, you know. And I think you're right. I think when you first get into this, you're trying to feel more masculine, and that's the wrong feeling that you are actually hoping to achieve.
Yeah, I don't even think it's the wrong feeling. I think it's the feeling that almost everybody starts with. It's just not where it ends, and it's okay that it starts somewhere. Just know that, particularly the listeners, right? If you're listening to this kind of content, you're looking for those answers. As you find them, things get better. Damien, man, as always, I love seeing you. I love having you on. I like that you're in the world. Where can folks find you if they're looking for you?
Yeah, I mean, look, I would say check out my YouTube channel, YouTube School of Attraction. My website, schoolofattraction.com.au. I've like integrated everything into the one website now. So you go to .com or .com.au, it all goes there. But yeah, like I would say check out the YouTube. You know, it'll get you to know me and the types of coaching and the mindsets. And if you watch one or two videos and learn something great, that my job's done. If you want to reach out and say hi.
Yeah, looking through Damien's stuff. If you found the dating content here helpful, you will find his channel helpful.
I hope so.
As always, I really appreciate you coming on. Thanks for being here.
Cheers. Thanks so much, Tim.
And that's our conversation with Damien. I'm so glad he comes on, and I'm really glad we've got him in our community to help us get through all the clutter and randomness that is the dating environment. Hopefully this episode helps you out. As always, we handed this over to our fact checker and got back some notes that we want to share with you to make sure we give you the clearest and best information possible. The first one is Damien talked about safetyism, and we get that from Ludikoff and Haidt. And that's a great framework, and it's widely used, and I appreciate it and think it's on the right track, but it's still being academically debated in research, so it's not clean fact yet. 2, female singlehood trends. We know that rates of never married adults in many developed countries are going up, that many women are getting married later or not at all. But the reasons for that aren't always choice. It's complex. It involves economic factors, cultural shifts. It's not just an independent choice, and that's worth noting. The next one is on abuse and long-term mental health. We know that abuse is correlated with depression, post-traumatic stress, and suicidality, and there's a lot of data backing that up. On the other end of it, there's also a lot of data on protective factors, how important stable relationships are, education, access to financial resources, and treatment. The data points are important, but they can't tell your story or any other individual's. Ideally, we use them as ways to find a path forward towards hope and include the whole picture of someone's experience. So it's worth just taking a moment and acknowledging that when we talk about abuse in these moments. It's more nuanced than if X happened to you, Y is the likely outcome. Next one is status loss and its impact on men versus women. While that's been largely true in my clinical experience and my personal experience, there's not empirical evidence of it. There's a lot of relationship around how men respond more viscerally to status loss than women, but the direct correlation between violence and status loss and a comparative study hasn't really happened yet. And the last one that I really want to take a minute with is the overall data behind conflict avoidance and its impact on dating. Damien and I are pulling from my clinical experience, his coaching experience, and it's one of the things that we see personal responsibility having huge outcomes for when it comes to someone's success in the dating market. But it's important to recognize that dating is complex. All these situations are touched by numerous factors. We both just think that if you take this on and you have these patterns of conflict avoidance, that you're going to do a lot better out there with all of the other complexity that comes up. Not that this is a catch-all and will make it all smooth and easy. And that's it for the fact check. Thanks for taking a minute and letting us make sure we get you the best information possible and clean up any mistakes that happen through the course of a conversation. It matters to me to get you the best information possible, and I appreciate the space to do it with. I know your time's valuable. Thanks for listening. If you got use out of this, and if you're still listening, you probably did, do us a favor and give us that subscription, give us that like, give us that rating. That 10 seconds of your time really goes a long way in helping us get the resources we need to make this as good as we can for you, keep improving, and just get more and better information out to guys who need it. Thanks for being here. Thanks for being the person trying to be better. This is Tim Diecke with American Masculinity, wishing you the best day. We'll see you next week when we talk to Ryan McKelly about how to be strong without becoming brittle out in the world.